Episode 19. Once he had informed his most trusted, Jackson, Stephen, and Ethan. His gamma Stephen, the one he'd entrust her safety to when he wasn't around, had stared at him for a full minute, then had just turned around and walked away, and as of yet, no one knew the man's thoughts. He would talk when he was ready. He had been chasing her with Jackson to try and stop her from leaving the pack territory, but had failed. It was possible he had guilt over her getting away, considering as the gamma, it was ingrained into his every fiber to protect the Luna with his life. Ethan, his delta, had simply sighed and shook his head, then said, "Well, what are we doing about getting her back then?" To his dislike, his father had informed his mother and siblings. His mother had stomped into his office very angrily, glaring right at him, and he knew instantly he was in trouble. Nothing like a mother's displeasure at something her child had done wrong. The child could always tell. This moment had been just like that for him. He had raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, and he'd state, "I know, I did wrong," but that had not stopped her from storming across the room and starting to slap him about anywhere she could, while he tried to block the hits. Havoc had stayed out of it. She was the only woman in his world who could get away with hitting him, well, probably one of two now. His father had pulled her away and calmed her down. He'd simply apologized, to which she'd stated flatly, "It's not me you need to apologize to, son." At his agreed response, she had stormed off out of his office, and his father had followed. Nathan knew his father was trying to calm her down further. Later on, he okayed the press conference and allowed it to be set up with human reporters. He designated the spot as to the front of the PAC's architecture firm, just 45 minutes from PAC borders, then set about adjusting the wording and response of his official statement to the press. He would be taking minimal questions, and he would stay on topic only. It was the next day that he received the shock of his life. His father walked into his office and dropped a photograph on his desk right in front of him. "The boy is definitely yours," he had stated, sounding very annoyed, jabbing a finger at the boy in the photograph. It was a picture of 3 children, a boy and twin girls, looked to be about 4 and 3 respectively. The date on the bottom of the photograph showed it had been taken a year ago. His heart ached terribly at the sight of them. They looked so happy, all playing at the beach, laughing up at the camera, probably J-Law taking the photo. The boy had his arms around the girls. He could see the boy's fingers were digging into their sides. He was tickling them, and they were all laughing. All 3 of them had her jewel green eyes and were shiny with joy and happiness, but all of them had his blonde hair. Goddess, the boy looked just like him when he was that age. Havoc was growling in his mind, racing around like he was ready to rip out of him. "Ours," he snarled at him. Nathan felt the drawing to them and couldn't tear his eyes from them. "They are all mine." Nathan replied without hesitation. He trusted Havoc's opinion 100%. He felt drawn to the 2 girls in the photo as much as he did the boy. His heart ached so badly, and when he touched his fingers to the photo, pain seared through him. Fuck, what had he done? Did she know that day? She had been begging him for just 2 minutes of his time, but he and Havoc had just found their fated mate, and he'd not cared about anything else at all. Hadn't wanted her touching him at all, to be honest. Recalled glaring at her touch, something he had enjoyed not more than 3 days earlier, the day before he had met his fated mate, actually. Had she been trying to tell him? Fuck. Had Cora only responded the way she had in order to protect her pups, his pups? Fuck. And he'd sent her away, pushed his alpha order at her without a single thought about the consequences, due to his mate's injury. This is a nightmare. "We have to fix it," Havoc whimpered at him. Guilt, regret, and sadness washing over him. He'd been just as responsible for what happened to her that day. He'd been present to assist in giving the order. He'd lost so much that day and didn't even know it. Shunned her and never thought about her again, if he was completely honest with himself. Neither of them had until the day they'd seen her on the TV. So full of life and confidence. "All of them, son?" his father questioned him, his tone very quiet. "Yes." Havoc is of the same opinion. "Triplets. You have really messed up. You know that, right?" "Yes," he sighed. "I'll find a way to fix it. We'll get her back, and she'll know what we are to her." "Not going to be easy, son," his father stated flatly, then left the room, closing the door behind him. He was about to get the biggest beating of his life, and he was going to have to take it. They were her grandbabies, and she'd not gotten to see them born, never gotten to hold them, spoil them, or watch them grow up. All the things she would have wanted, all the things he wanted, and he'd royally screwed up. Gut-wrenching guilt was eating away at him. Goddess, help me to not die when she comes for me. His most trusted friends were all in his office. They had been sitting around discussing protection detail for her, who was going, and what to set up officially in the human world. None of them said anything. They were all just staring at him. He could feel their eyes on him, yet he couldn't even look at them in return. Too much guilt for sending her away, and in such a delicate condition. A condition she'd had to deal with on her own. She had been friends with all of them all their lives, a year younger than him and Jackson but the same age as Stephen and Ethan. She had trained with them due to her father's rank as top warrior, and he was the one training them too. Then when Cora had come along so darn fast, no one could keep up with her. She'd fit into their group without issue, even though she was a girl. She had never had a problem roughhousing with them or teasing and playing with them. She was just one of the group, made them all laugh many times. Now it was all very wrong. He'd done this, split her apart from the group, from all of them, sent her away, and they'd all lost a friend that day due to his actions and thoughtlessness, and now the utter devastation of his decision was finally revealed to him. He had lost his childhood friend, his one-time love interest, and his children, who had not even been known to him. He doubted very much they knew who he was. Did she even tell them what they were? Growing up in the human world, it could be that she had never mentioned wolf in society to them. It was a secret to be kept from humans. Was she raising them human? Probably, due to his order to never come back. He saw movement in the corner of his eye and finally looked at Jackson, Stephen, and Ethan. They were all walking towards him. He wondered how Havoc would handle them trying to beat the life out of him. Havoc was quiet. Probably wouldn't interfere. They did deserve it. Though being the alpha was unlikely to happen, he guessed, even if they were his childhood friends, respect must be given or punishment would be dealt out. They all walked behind his desk and looked at the photo in his hand. He had yet to put it down. A part of him couldn't. His children, his heirs to the pack. Out there for all this time, completely cut off from the pack and its protection, unprotected, and he's solely responsible for it. How could he blame her for any of this? Goddess, he was going to have to beg for forgiveness at some point. She would never forget what he had done or how she had to be on her own with them all this time, how he had been the one to cause her to leave. Cute pups, Jackson stated calmly. Must be a handful. 3 alpha pups all at once. Ethan mused aloud with a half-laugh. Stephen said nothing at all, still silent on the subject of J-Law being his alpha's mate and now mother to his alpha's pups. Still no one knew what was going on inside his head. Rafe had yet to emerge either.
Full story is available at novelpalace.com. Click the link in the comment section to get it free.